So is a role of in accountability and good governance in Guyana. With us tonight are the leader of LJP, Liberal Justice Party, Mr. Lenox Shuman, and the chairperson of ANUG, a new and united party of Guyana, Mr. Timothy Jonas, and the leader of the Federal Party of Guyana, Mr. Chandra Sohan, former magistrate. Gentlemen, welcome all to our another Wednesday edition of Globespan 24/7. If I may begin tonight with this whole issue of good governance. What is good governance for you? And I'll ask each one of you. First, let's begin with the Deputy Speaker of the House, Mr. Lenox Shuman.
Well, Vishnu, let me say good night to yourself, Tim and Chandra, and all your viewers out there. I don't think I've been on this program since late last year, so let me take this opportunity to wish all the viewers a very happy 2022, and also to thank Nohar and his crew for continuing to present the public with this platform, at least to get engaged with the issues, and for us to engage the public through this forum. I think there are a variety of pillars of, and I can't say specifically 1 or 7 or 13, but there are a variety of pillars of good governance that I think when someone talks to me about good governance, that I think of the first one being adherence to the rule of law. How a government interacts with first and foremost, the Constitution and the other subordinate laws. I think that is one. Then you'd have to look at how the government interacts with the public and I'd say non-government actors, non-state actors, and also how they implement the policies and the impact of those policies. And I'm sure that we'll have pretty much an hour and a half to interrogate a variety of those things. And I don't know if I missed your question, but what represents good governance to me? There, like I said, a variety of pillars upon which good governance stands, and I look forward to having this discussion. In all honesty,
and will it also include consultation? I take it with the civic society, the public, the opposition parties, NGOs, and so forth. Mr. Timothy Jonas of the new and united Guyana Party, ANUG. Jonas, your volume. Turn on your volume.
Hear me?
Now I can hear you. Yeah.
It's good to see you again. It's been a long time. Nice to be on the show. Thanks to Nohar. Good governance has variables. It changes depending on the needs of the country. So in the context of Guyana, we have to remember that our system is rudimentary and we are at the early stages of any kind of development because we've been repressed for 50 years. So the needs are large and the dangers are many.
We seem to be frozen. It could be an issue with Mr. Jonas' Wi-Fi. You want to start over, Tim?
Well, are you hearing me?
Now we're hearing you, yes. I wasn't hearing you before.
Okay. So the first limb for me is transparency. Okay. Because in our very rudimentary stage of development, our government is the largest employer and the largest provider of contracts. So corruption is easy and the corruption can be rampant. So there needs to be transparency in dealings. Right?
No, you could continue. Continue.
I think also small government. The government, because they're the largest employer and have access to large finances, have the temptation to award jobs, award positions, and award contracts. The old family and friends refrain. And I think that it's important to delegate and decentralize so that there are autonomous agencies that can operate independently and report directly to Parliament, rather than the government controlling the purse strings for each of the NDCs, for each of the regional commissions, and going down the line. So small government, transparent government, and then because of our unique bipartisan demographic, I think we need to have a process of consultative decision making where the opposition is involved and has a real say, not a minor say. Of course, we don't see any of those things, but for me, that is what good governance will be.
The leader of the federal party, Mr. Chandra Sohan. Well, how would you?
Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Bisram, and thanks for having us on this program. Good evening, Tim T. Good evening, Lenox. In addition to what my friends have said as far as good governance is concerned, and the good governance intertwines with accountability as well, which the topic is for tonight. And good governance to me means that the persons in leadership or the political party in government as we know it now ought to be responsive to the needs of the people. Promises are made during elections, and when time comes to go into a place where you can actually implement the promises and have them benefit the people then who you have solicited, there has to be systems in place to ensure that things are transparent. People in office are accountable for what they do, and the electorate generally ought to be able to see in a clear manner what it is that is going on in the country. We can't operate in a state of secrecy and call that transparency in government. Our system is one which is small, is isolated to some extent, and lots of things that is going on in this country, for instance, are done in secrecy. We don't know, and we're not aware, and nobody seems interested in wanting to disclose to us what it is that is going on in this country. So good governance to me is to ensure that things are transparent so that people can be able to judge and make sensible decisions as to where we are being taken.
When you speak of secrecy, things are being done secrecy now. It's not been secret only now. It's been secret for a long time, hasn't it?
Oh, definitely. I'm not. When I say secrecy, I'm not referring to now. I'm referring to maybe from the 1966 to now.
Okay. So historically, there have been secretive
Yes.
Governance. Okay, so now we have defined governance. So what do you see as the role of the so-called small parties, third parties, minor parties in governance in Guyana? And so let's begin with the Deputy Speaker.
I think one of the important things that we have to look back historically at is the formation of the centrist / third party or smaller party per se. They're not birthed out of a whim. They're birthed out of a need, and that need in itself was to break the dichotomy that exists in Guyana. To maybe at some point hold the government accountable. The unfortunate thing is that since the 1950s with the United Force and Peter de Gar, it seems as though those parties have always become subsumed by larger political forces, of which the latest and last example would have been the Alliance for Change. And I think there is enough in the country to say that there is need for a third party for that accountability mechanism. And I think that is where the smaller or I'd say the newer parties stand the best chance to be able to hold the government's feet to the fire in that sense. While I say that, we have to be very, at least I would say that I have to be very cautious in how I approach that. And I say that because if by some slim chance of numeracy, the Liberty and Justice Party were to win the elections, and I know people always ask about when you win, what will be the thing, is winning an election may not be the answer. It is how does one govern? You go back to the good governance issue. We do not have the capacity to govern. I don't think any small or third party can say that they have the capacity to govern. Not even the Alliance for Change would have had that. But I think what the third parties would have is the ability and the objectiveness to hold the government's feet to the fire and pretty much say, look, these are the things that you commit to. This is what the laws, or these are the things that the laws of Guyana say, and we are expecting that you're going to adhere to them very strictly. Of course, we have not seen that. It's been a task to consolidate that center per se, to be able to take that position at times.
There haven't been any consultations?
I'm not saying that there hasn't been any consultations. I'm saying that we haven't really engaged meaningfully over the long term and to strategize and figure out how we could take that position.
Oh, you're talking about the minor parties, the small parties,
Correct.
the newer parties.
Correct.
Okay.
I think that was your question around what part do the smaller parties play.
Okay. Mr. Jonas?
There's a stranglehold that the two parties have on Guyana. The stranglehold has existed since independence, and any systemic reform that we have seen in the history of Guyana, any legislative reform, any procedural changes, have for the most part been designed to reinforce that stranglehold. When you have elections, the system is designed to make it very difficult for a new third force to come into the scene. The two parties are established. They ignore the rules about financial spending and accountability during election time. The incumbent party will, with vulgarity, use the assets of the state, whether it's Gaisuko buses or whether it's public locations or whether it's police detachments, to move their crowds around, to hold rallies, and with no accountability whatsoever. When the winner of the two gets into government, the system is designed to give that winner total control, so that if there are only two parties, that winner also controls parliament, and therefore appoints all the commissions, whether it's public service, police, teacher, any commission you think about, passes the laws to perpetuate their control over the finances. So the system is designed to maintain the stranglehold that the two parties have. And therefore, everything we see and every result we have in Guyana is a reflection of the deadlock which results from that stranglehold. The examples which come to mind just in the last week, the criticisms by the opposition of President Ali's appointment of an acting police commissioner. Now, the Constitution says that the president can appoint commissioner of police after meaningful consultation with the leader of the opposition. So again, you have this deadlock between
since Timothy seems to be frozen, perhaps we can go to Timothy.
I'm hearing you, Vishnu. I'm hearing you quite well. I don't know if I'm stuck.
But, yeah, it was frozen. I wasn't hearing you. Did those two gentlemen hear him?
Yeah, we're hearing you clearly, but of course he was frozen for a while.
It was frozen. So Tim, you just want to recap that point?
Okay. So the deadlock that the two parties have fighting each other reflects in non-movement, in the stagnation of the economy, in the stagnation of the society, in the stagnation of important offices. And what is also sad is it politicizes honest, hardworking professionals. So we have an acting chancellor, an acting chief justice, an acting commissioner of police. We have it every time a change of government. We have people thrown out of office for political reasons and political appointees put into office. The EPA, the Guyana Energy Agency, all of these agencies, because of the stranglehold of the two parties. So it's difficult for a third force to break in. And the aspiration of a third force has got to be the seats in parliament that will give a swing vote. There's no other way to do it. And I think that we're getting there.
But Tim, governance, the very nature of governance is that way. I mean, parties contest and whoever wins the prize and govern the state. I mean, we can't blame the political parties for that because that's how the system is worldwide. All political systems are that way. Whoever wins governs and dominates. So in all fairness, either party, either major party, that's what the Constitution says. They adhere to the Constitution. Political appointees are appointed, and when the government, if it loses, its appointees are replaced by those of the victorious party, the incumbent now. That system, I don't think is going to change anytime soon anyway.
What you've done here is you have described a system and you've said it's always been like this, so we have to live with it. But if it's always been like this and we have to live with it, and we're the third poorest country in the hemisphere, and we keep doing things how we have always been doing them, then we will keep sliding down that slippery slope into corruption and poverty. So either we change it and we find a system that works, especially given the particular dynamics of Guyana politics, or we keep sliding down that slope and say, man, that's how it's always been. The winner controls everything. But we've seen the corruption that is involved in that. So I don't think that's an answer.
No. So we'll come to propose solutions later on. I just wanted to bring that point out that the system is that way, and therefore we cannot blame one political party for dominance in the nation, in the country. Mr. Sohan?
Vishnu, the system which we have right now, and as you say, if we continue along the lines that we're going right now, well, of course, there will be a stranglehold on anyone or any other political organization who wants to come to the fore. But if we go back to 1964, in 1964, we had a constituency system of that was what our electoral system was. After 1964, there was a constitution which took us into independence, which was known as the 1966 Constitution. And the 1966 Constitution is the one which created the electoral system which we have right now. And that is what FedUp has envisioned, that if we were able to go back to the system in which we had then there will be a more accountability to the people who the electorate is supposed to serve. There is going to be a system where it is not the party which fetches the people who goes to parliament. It is the persons who will vote directly for the person. They are the MPs. And that, in my mind, is what this country really needs, because the racial divides which keep us strangled the way we are today, that is never going to change unless the electoral system changes.
Anything else to add about the role of small parties, new parties, minor parties?
Well, the small parties, as my friends have indicated, we are quite aware that we don't have the ability to go and change government tomorrow. But all we want is to be able to have a say in how this country is being managed for the betterment of the people of this country. We cannot continue to have two parties taking this country wherever they want, whenever it's their turn. And that is a repeated saying in this country now. It's my turn or your turn. And the people then are left in the wilderness.
If I may ask, has the government attempted to include the small parties, the newer parties, in governance? and by that
Well, not Fed for sure. I don't know of the other parties.
I mean, are the smaller parties represent Tom? Yeah, Timothy. I'm sorry,
No,
Lennox.
and I'm glad you asked that question because when the government won, at least when the declaration was made, the General Secretary of the People's Progressive Party, Civic, reached out to myself and my colleagues in the Liberty and Justice Party and asked if there are areas of interest within which the LJP would like to operate. Of course, we provided a few of those, and quite a number of our people have been employed with the government, or I'd say with the state agencies per se. I don't know to what extent that is inclusive governance, but keep in mind I'm also the advisor to the Minister of Public Works on Aviation. Whether it influences policy or not, that is yet to be seen. I think at some point, it's not only about inclusion at an implementation stage, but inclusion at a policy level also. And I think those are the things that we look forward to, and seeing how our voices could work to change, maybe bring about some change in the system.
I mean, I've noticed several individuals from the minor parties and as well as from the PNC who are included in various commissions and agencies and so forth. And so I was asking that question. I mean, surely there has been some kind of inclusion, perhaps not to the level that one looks forward to, but has this been helpful?
I, at least from where I sit, I think it has been a position where my core expertise have come into play. And I know that there are other agencies where other members of other political parties have been included. But once again, I think it is important that we understand that in a political system such as Guyana, where there's a great degree of suspicion as to what people's motivations are, it becomes really difficult to pull people in that one cannot repose that kind of confidence in. If you don't have confidence in a person, whether it be political loyalty or intellectual capacity and all those things, then it becomes really difficult to say, you know what, and I use the current panel as an example. If I were to say, Chandra, could you come on in and help me to deal with a specific portfolio? I would not know what his motivations may be. Remember, we're caught in this deadlock, as Tim put it earlier, where two larger political parties are fighting. I don't know what their motivations are. So it becomes really difficult for me to engage meaningfully at a certain level. I'm not making an excuse per se, I'm simply explaining how the system currently is. I think were I sitting in a political position, I would want to bring in the people that I have confidence in, that would not undermine what we are attempting to do, that's one, and B, that also has the competence to do what we set out to do. And I don't know if that is the way the government operates, or if any other political parties operate that way, but were I sitting in a position where I had to govern, that is the direction that I would look. That when I bring people in to sit on whatever board or commission, that I have to have the confidence that they are going to drive the manifesto or agenda that I put forth.
Mr. Jonas, has the government reached out to ANUG or any, or whether you know, or any opposition parties?
Vishnu, I think you gotta distinguish clearly cosmetic and substance. And I don't see an effort to do that. I'm sure you will remember recently the opposition walked out after their nominee onto a commission was rejected. And the private sector commission nominee was put on. And then the government used their majority to put on their nominee on the commission. So there were, in effect, 0 opposition nominees on a very important commission. It's all well and good to say, oh, I'll put a Liberty and Justice Party member on this innocuous tangential board that you don't very often, and publish it and pretend to the people that you're being inclusive. But if you have a party that represents half of the citizens of Guyana, and that party gets not a single seat on one of the most important commissions, gets not a single seat on the commission dealing with the petroleum, the Natural Resources Fund, not a single seat on procurement issues, not a single voice in appointing the Police Service Commission that, as you know, was peremptorily terminated and no appointments pretended to be made. If those reshuffling procedures are done unilaterally and that the party that represents half of the country has no say in it, well, are we really serious if we're asking a question about if government has reached out to give you some appointment on the ethnic committee, ethnic commission board? Don't we have to decide what is substantial and what is cosmetic, what is politics and what is real? Right now, we have no clue how decisions are made on expenditure from petroleum, from the Natural Resources Fund. We don't get a peep in that door. We have no clue how GPL is operating, how the large contracts are being awarded. We hear that there's a Demerara Harbor Bridge contract where the winner, the winning bid, is not the group going ahead, but it went to the second winning bid. And we don't know why. And a whole country is not in a position to inquire to find out why. So either we are going to say, look, let's look at substance and make sure that transactions are transparent and everybody knows what's going on. Or we put a little coat of whitewash on the thing and we ignore the fact that the sewage is bubbling underneath. And we pretend that all is hunky-dory and we talk about one people and one nation.
Anything to add to that, Mr. Sohan, before we move on to another question?
Well, very much that's what Timothy just indicated there is what we all see every day. And it is the same thing that we would like to see something being done differently. We would like to be included because we all have an interest in the way forward for this country. And that is the reason why we have not joined up with either of the two major parties. And we've decided that we are going to bring out our different interests in our different communities throughout the diaspora and to see what difference or changes we were able to make or to contribute towards. And we have not been given an opportunity to be a part of that whole process.
All right, so we talked about.
Vishnu, permit me a quick
Yeah,
second.
please go ahead. Go ahead, Tim.
I think you had mentioned something, and I don't want to dwell on it too much. But the majority of the political world really operates, and I just came up to Canada because of some issues at home here. But the majority of the political world operates. The winner is given that right to govern. However, they include people or other political parties that is entirely at their behest. Take the Canadian example, where the Liberals won a minority government, and now they have to get the support of either the Conservatives or the New Democrats to stay and drive their agenda. And those things are a matter of negotiations. But they could simply walk away and say, you know what, we are a minority government, we're going to govern in whatever manner and not engage. And I think Canada, while we do have that center third per se, there's also a much larger population in Guyana. One will quickly find out that the population is not only small, the political echelon is also very small, the executive is very small. There are a lot of very small moving parts in Guyana compared to a large country. So if we're to go and touch on something like corruption, for example, I don't think that we can afford to put 90% of the population in jail. And people are going to say, well, why would you put 90% of the people in jail? Every single person at some point or another touches another one who would have subverted the law at some point. A police officer stops you on the road, your paper is out of order, man, here's a drink money and you're gone. That in itself is corruption. You go and purchase something that is stolen unbeknownst to anyone else. That in itself is, you're a party to a crime. You've got corruption at so many levels that if we were to look at it through rooting out corruption and not driving a corrupt society, we wouldn't really have people in the country to govern, or pretty much people to govern, period.
I mean, I don't know the extent to which the Liberal Party in Canada consults with the New Democrats. But in Guyana, there must be some drawing of the line. To what extent must the government consult with the opposition or the minor parties, or even civil society?
I think constitutional law is not my forte. I think we've got two learned lawyers on the panel here. But I want to suggest that the Constitution, that line as to where that consultative process lies. I don't want to jump too far out of that. Yes, there is Article 13 that speaks about consultation. But we also have to remember that the electoral system in itself is part of a process. That if I go to the electorate and I say, look, I've got a list of 10 things or 20 things that I'm going to deliver to you, then that is part of the consultative process. The people either elect me or they don't, based on what I have committed. And I think that, that was dealt with, if I may say, on March 2nd, 2020. I'm not saying that that's the end of it, by the way, because you still have to go through the parliamentary process when you table laws and all of those things. But there is a very significant component of that consultation that comes through the electoral process.
Well, let's ask the two learned lawyers. We begin first with ANUG chairperson, Mr. Jonas.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
On consultation, to what extent must the government consult? The minor parties, opposition parties, civic society, and then how do you decide who is civic society, who is not civic society?
Well, as I said, if you're asking for a question of law as the obligation to consult, you then have to define consult. And consult really is a very weak word. I can decide I'm appointing Lenox, and I can call you, and I can say, Vishnu, I'm obligated to consult with you. I've decided to appoint Lenox, and our consultation is finished. I don't know if that's what's intended by consult.
But the Constitution says that, consult, the Constitution says consult.
Well, it used to, in respect of the Chancellor and the Chief Justice, and those words were removed and replaced with the agreement of. So now to appoint the Chancellor or the Chief Justice, President needs the agreement of the Leader of the Opposition. And since those words were inserted, we haven't had a Chancellor or Chief Justice appointed, which is the deadlock I'm talking about. The two parties have a stranglehold. And if they feel that an individual, however professional, however distinguished that individual is, may not be sympathetic or even maybe truly independent, they don't want that individual, because the two parties are not interested in folk who are professional or independent. They are interested in people who will toady up, belly up to the bar, ask for a drink, and obey the rules. And that's what we're seeing. And for that reason, we are seeing good professional people sidelined over and over. And we are seeing the political toadies being put into positions to the detriment of the country. We are really in a stranglehold.
Mr. Sohan?
Well, we, as Timothy said again, we are in a backslide in this country, for instance. Let's take again the absence of a Judicial Service Commission. We are already short of judges in this country. And since 2015 to now, we have had judges who have retired, sorry. And there has been no placement because there cannot be agreement on the appointment of a Judicial Service Commission. We will come short of another 3 judges very quickly. And there is no replacement for them. And as we rightly said, there must be agreement before we can appoint these different commissions. As far as long as we can not agree, then there will be no person who will be substantively appointed. We will continue to have actors all the time. And these persons who are actors not necessarily are persons who are the best qualified persons for the positions which they hold. But yet they can be bypassed because the commission is not there so that the rules for appointment can be followed as is dictated by the Constitution. So for as long as we're unable to get the correct systems in place, then we are really not going anywhere.
Um,
And the important commissions, as we say again, there has not been any agreement. It is just not consultation. There has to be agreement, and that is the important part which we have to pay attention to. If there is no agreement, well then we will just keep who I want in place, and we will figure it out one of these is. At the same time, the people who depend on these various commissions, these various offices to be substantively appointed, they are never going to get done. For instance, let's take the Police Service Commission. There are police officers who will go into retirement, who could have been eligible to become a deputy commissioner, assistant commissioner, maybe the commissioner of police, but they will never be appointed to those substantive positions because there is an absence of a police service commission, which has been so for many years now, and there's nothing in sight that will be resolved shortly. Hence, we have another acting commissioner, and he will be going off in another couple of months from now. So we may very well end up with another acting commissioner again.
So we have a lot of actors. It better be send them to Hollywood or Bollywood.
That's all.
Mr. Shuman made a very, very good point. He said, "Look, there is consultation by all the parties with the electorate. When you present your manifesto to them, it is consultation, and the people decide, okay, we have been consulted, and so I choose one of the two dominant parties to govern. Why should, as a devil's advocate, why should I, as a major party, would want to come and consult with you guys as the minor parties? If indeed the voters have rejected you, because consultation already took place on March 2nd.
So far, in the responses I've heard, the approach hasn't been to say the small third parties are players to be consulted. I have actually specifically been talking about the large opposition party, and I've said they represent half of the country. Now, it's all well and good to say that there is consultation when there's election. But if you can go to a village, and in that village, 296 of the votes are for one party and 3 votes for the other party, then we're not even pretending at a consultative process. I was a bit taken aback that Lenox said that, because Lenox has previously said, correctly in my view, that in Guyana you look at somebody and you know how they voted. So there's no consultative process. There's a process of brainwashing and propaganda in your head from the time you're taking in mother's milk as a baby. So the very small minority that do vote on principles, do vote on policies, they're in the minority and they do have a consultative process. But that is the reason you can't equate Guyana's situation with Republicans and Democrats or with the Tories and the Liberals. You can't make that equation because we do not vote policy here. We vote something else. And because our demographic gives the opposition half of the votes, whichever side is in opposition, it is fundamentally important that half of the population represented by the opposition must feel that they have a voice. You can't
Again, Jonas seems to be frozen. If I could ask Mr. Shuman, you want to fill in the meanwhile?
I'm not sure if I could do as apt a job as Tim is at presenting his point. But I also want to, at least to ensure that the viewers understand that when I talk about the consultative process through the and I've also said that that is not the end of consultation. We still have a legislature. We still have the tabling of laws within which the ideas are presented and the laws are debated in Parliament. Of course, we know that the government having majority will generally move that. But I will tell you something very interesting happened. I think it was last November at one of the parliamentary sittings when we sat down and debated a bill in Parliament, and there were, believe it or not, there were actual changes proposed by the opposition in Parliament, and the government in themselves took, I'd say, a tremendous amount of those points and included it in the bill. Now, that also is part of the consultative process. Now,
it is, yes.
One of the things that we really don't have a lot of, and I really don't want to stomp on my opposition colleagues too much. What I would say is a lack of leadership within the opposition. The opposition benches are leaderless. We've sat without a substantive leader of the opposition for how many months? And now they're going through this whole massive PR mess where they can't decipher if David Granger's signature is real or not to appoint two other people, whether APNU is consulting or PNC is consulting with their APNU colleagues and all of these things. So there's a complete lack and absence of leadership in the opposition benches. But Vishnu, I want to go back to that point. The consultative process within the parliamentary structure must be built on reason. And I think if you look at what happened November, I think it was, again, don't quote me on that, is that when the opposition proposed a variety of amendments to one of the laws that the government had tabled, the government said, yes, we could work with this. And we went through item by item. And then they say, all those in favor of this change, aye, nay, right? And then that is how they managed to get some significant changes to that bill. And I would say, if I dare, that came through a lot of dialogue back and forth. And I think there must be a willingness at some point on both parties to want to work. We have not, and I will say this because I sit there, I have not seen the willingness of my colleagues in the opposition to want to establish that line of dialogue. Just when you think that there's a breakthrough, they go right back down to basic, to the rudimentary state. Blowing whistles in Parliament, very unparliamentary conduct, trying to steal the mace and a whole host of things. I don't see that as being helpful. It does not show the people that you're in a position to be responsible enough. And I sit in Parliament and I hear a lot of the issues. Yes, I'm not saying that the government side is completely free from all of these heckling and all that stuff. I mean, we have seen what the Minister of Local Government has said in Parliament. At least it was broadcast publicly. I'm not saying that they're free from guilt, but I'm saying that the opposition, at least my colleagues in the opposition side, there must be someone who is willing to step forward and say, I'm going to lead this party and lead this party in a responsible manner so that the people in themselves could have confidence in us to be able to represent their interests and those issues in Parliament. And we have not seen that.
Okay, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I'll let Timothy complete his point, and then we'll go to Mr. Sohan.
Announcing Curry Duck Curry Competition 2022 in Cancun, Mexico.
Hey, y'all take y'all eyes on past week? Last year, y'all take all my cousins to Punta Cana and slaughter them. I drink and sport up. Now y'all want to take another set of us to Cancun? Well, yes. And wait, now y'all taking Raymond Ramnarain, Terry G plus Tassa. Okay, y'all take Raymond, Terry, and the Tassa and go along your way.
Bring it down, 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 ding. Bring it down, down, ding. Bring it down, down, ding. Hey yo, my sweetheart, say I'm addicted to you.
Make it a family and friends reunion. Curry Duck Curry Competition 2022 in Cancun, Mexico on July 28th to August 1st. For more info, call Globespan at 212-243-0865. In Canada, call 647-557-6200. In Trinidad, call Amirals at 645-1604. And in Guyana, 227-1701, or visit us at travelspan.com.
is when this wedding got done. Right now my belly burning for the 7 curry. But them fancy people just call it vegetarian food. I just call it 7 curry.
Order your 7 curry or vegetarian box today from allfromonesupplier.com and get free shipping throughout the US.
जन्म जन्म का साथ है तुम्हारा हमारा.
Bollywood on the Beach is a family and friends event with Bollywood Entertainment. July 14th to the 18th, enjoy a 5 days and 4 nights all-inclusive vacation with your family and friends and your culture. Performers from India, Pakistan, Trinidad and Guyana will be live at the resorts with your favorite Bollywood songs. In Punta Cana, Dominican Republic. Stay in the family section or in the adults-only section and enjoy over 12 restaurants, 11 bars, 7 pools, play areas, spas, and exclusive beach area. Your all-inclusive Bollywood on the Beach vacation is from $1,095 per person, which includes your airfare, transfer, hotel, and all you can eat and drink. Make it a family and friends reunion in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic. Flights available from all US cities, Canada, Trinidad, and Guyana. For rates, date, and more info, call Travelspan at 212-243-0865. In Canada, call 647-557-6200. In Trinidad, call Amerals at 645-1604. And in Guyana, 227-1701, or visit us at travelspan.com.
Dave's West Indian has all of your West Indian groceries and items. They carry curry powders, pepper sauces, sodas, snacks, and much more. Dave's West Indian is the choice for West Indian items. Visit Dave's at 11808 Liberty Avenue or call 718-843-3283. And for Dave West Indian products online, visit allfromonesupplier.com for free shipping throughout the United States. Dave's West Indian is a proud sponsor of Travelspan's Curry Duck Curry in Punta Cana. Flights to Guyana have never been cheaper. Check out these non-stop direct fares from JFK to Guyana. One way from $150 and round trip from $344. From Guyana to New York, one way from $210 and round trip from $360. These are non-stop direct flights to and from Guyana on American, Caribbean, or JetBlue. These cheap fares will not last, so call Travelspan today. In New York at 718-845-0437. That's 718-845-0437. In Georgetown, call 227-1701. And in Berbice, call 337-4287. Are you looking for investment opportunities or retirement, or even to relocate to Florida? Then Orlando is the place for you. Great deals with spacious land are available. Call Shanisa Jabbar for all your realtor needs at 321-217-1556. That's 321-217-1556. Or email her at shanisajabbar@gmail.com.
So welcome back, viewers, listeners, to Wednesday's edition of Globespan 24/7, owned and operated by Mr. Nohar Singh. And we're discussing tonight the role of the third parties, minor parties, new parties in good governance and accountability in Guyana. With us tonight is the Deputy Speaker, Mr. Lenox Shuman, who is also leader of the LJP in Guyana, the chairperson of ANUG, ANUG, Mr. Timothy Jonas, and the leader of the Federal Party, Mr. Chandra Sohan. Let's hear from Mr. Sohan. Mr. Sohan, anything to add?
Vishnu, when it comes to
preceding speakers.
when it comes to consultation and passing of legislation, for instance, our constitution, our laws provide very clearly the stages which we go. There's a drafting of the bill, there's consultation with civic society, then it goes to parliament, there's first reading, second reading, amendments are made, adjustments are made, and so forth before something is actually passed into law. That consultative process is what every Guyanese is entitled to be a part of. We only hear from time to time or in certain sectors or certain areas that that is being done. As far as I'm aware, let's say the local content legislation, for instance, I have not heard that any consultation forum was held in Region 6. Yet, things were done and the legislation was actually passed. Now, many of us are of the opinion or the belief that local content means preserving jobs for a certain percentage of Guyanese or pro rata. In terms of 100 jobs are required for a certain industry, then 80% must go to Guyanese. And that's what we hear that or understand generally. That's what the layman knows local content to mean. That is not what the end of local content. Local content has to do with the actual investments which are being made in this country, who is coming to make this investment, what type of investment they can make, and what limitations comes with that. For instance, we can't go to Trinidad and say you want to go invest in a business and buy a piece of land in my own name. Now can you go to Suriname and do that? If you're coming on board as far as local content is concerned, you have to come and partner with someone who is a citizen of this country so that we don't end up selling out all our land to foreigners when they come. But yet that was not something which was made public or made known to everybody who's interested or the diaspora or civic society, that that is supposed to be inclusive of the limitations of local content. So when it comes to consultation, there is not free consultation, but as Lenox rightly pointed out, this country is only separated in one seat in parliament. And if one government is sitting with only a one seat majority, then what happens to the rest of the people who are represented by the opposition party, which makes it a difference of only a couple of thousand votes? Don't we, the other persons, have a right or to have a voice in parliament? Lenox rightly put up again that the opposition is maybe not making enough contribution or worthy contribution as they ought to. And maybe for that reason, their voice is not coming across strongly as it ought to. But that does not mean that whatever is said and done, the remainder of the people in this country don't have a say at all. And it's only that one seat majority has everything else to say and to rule and to control. So when we go back to this whole consultation and the accountability process and the local governance process or the governance process, it all has to be representative of a country as a whole and not as representative of a political party in the office and the political support which goes towards that one political party. We are a multicultural society with 6 known races, but yet when we go to vote, it is not those 6 races which are represented when the final count is made. Each party has their own support. They are able to achieve that majority or that bit of support. That is where our votes go. And we have to call it a square as a square. We are racially divided in our votes. It's either the PPP in government or the PNC in government. And it doesn't mean that whoever's there, you are going to neglect the other people or not pay keen or more interest in what they have to say or what they want to see or what is supposed to be for the betterment of country. Whoever is in government, they're supported no matter what they do. The government, their supporters are there. And that is how we have been since 1966 now.
If I may, I noticed that the government had outreaches with the ministers going spread out to various parts of the country. Wouldn't that be part of consultation as well?
I don't see that as being part of consultation. I see that as the government just concretizing their support base or trying to attract new support towards their base for the sake of a Chandra majority. But when it comes to giving thought or serious consideration to what may be said, those are not issues which are generally being recognized. I'd say, look, in Region 6, for instance, the farmers were protesting a couple of weeks ago because of the price for paddy. It was not until about after a week that some representative government had some meeting with them. In fact, I met with those farmers or a set of those farmers before government representatives were able to meet with them. I do have a possible solution to the whole situation which is going on in this country right now, as far as paddy is concerned. But nobody would ask me what I think. And the farmers then, after I've explained certain things to them, they tended to believe that, yes, this can be the solution or one way of assisting them. We're not talking about giving out handouts to the farmers. I am saying that Burma, for instance, which is situated in Region 5, is one of the largest rice facility equivalent to the functional ones now. The government intends to spend, and I hope I'm not wrong about this, because I've seen this endorsed by the president's photograph in the Kaichor newspaper about 3 Thursdays ago, that the government wants to spend 175 million US dollars to buy black belly sheep. That money multiplied by 2 is $35 billion. That money alone, paying a farmer $70,000 per ton, can buy all the paddy which has been produced this crop year. I am saying if the government were to utilize, say, the Burma facility and spend 50 million US dollars and buy as much paddy as that facility can hold and pay the farmer the $70,000 a ton, once you take that out of the hand of the millers, the farmer gets more. And that money is not a handout. Somebody will have to come back and buy that paddy, or before Burma buys out whatever its capacity is, the miller will have to meet that threshold. And I believe that can be one of the easiest solutions to it. But going back again to consulting, we know what the problem is. Our issue is that we need to find a solution. And we can't be speaking of the problems all the time. Because if we keep doing that, and if a government official goes into every part of this country and hears the same thing, we're not solving nothing. So that is why we need some inclusiveness as far as the small parties are concerned, so that we can be a voice of those people to whoever is concerned to address them.
Let's hear Mr. Jonas.
Before Tim comes on, I want to touch on one thing here that I think, sitting in Parliament, I've seen the parliamentary process at work. And I think when Chandra is talking about, meaningful consultation, of course, meaningful also means logical to some extent. I distinctly remember when what is now known as the Cannabis Bill or the Marijuana Bill was tabled in Parliament. When the opposition presented their bill, basically, you could have, they want to decriminalize all narcotics. They didn't really define a single one, which is just cannabis. That's one. And the Attorney General rightfully brought up that not only did the opposition want to decriminalize it, but you could have up to 5 kilograms in your possession, but you can't smoke the thing. So if I can't smoke it, what am I going to use it for? Just walk around with it? At some point, consultation, for it to be meaningful consultation, it also have to have some degree of logic to it. And I have not seen that logic, nor have I seen, once again, the kind of the opposition benches to be able to do that. Look, we've had a number of parliamentary subcommittees that have to be existent through the life of a parliament. And I will tell you that we sit in a very critical position. When I say we, as in the joiner, the very seat that we occupy. Not a single line of consultation comes from my colleagues within the opposition. Even in the lack of a leader of the opposition, no one reaches out and say, hey, Lenox, we've got this parliamentary subcommittee meeting. Do you have an input in this? We've got this interparliamentary unit outreach, which one of the most recent one was in Indonesia. Not a single person reaches out. I remember before one of the bills was presented to the floor, what I was told is that the government had sent a memo requesting the presence of the opposition and leader of the opposition to discuss a bill before it's tabled. And I was attending virtual, and not a single person reached out to Lenox Shuman, who also represents in Parliament and TNM, to say, look, Lenox, the government has asked if we are willing to meet them. We may not, but are you interested in meeting them to have an opportunity to have an input into this law? So we cannot simply look at it that the government themselves are not consulting. In order for it to be meaningful, there must be some kind of a logical input, a logical course, if I were to put it that way. And I have not seen that in my colleagues in the opposition, unfortunately.
So your colleagues in the opposition themselves don't reach out to you?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Jonas, anything to add about this consultative process before we summarize and close off?
Well, I smiled when you mentioned ministers going into interior regions and far-flung.
I noticed you smile, yes.
Because we've already had a discussion about cosmetics and substance. And I don't know what consultation happened when the minister goes to talk to the shopkeeper in the back of the village up in Mara or up in Region 9. So there are photo ops that have been done. We've seen ministers going handing out free money to people in white envelopes. We've seen ministers braving the many waterways in boats going to far-flung areas. That's all very pretty. It's all politics. It's all meaningless. It makes for a good photo opportunity, but don't let's pretend that that's consultation. As Lenox says, the opposition have not shown leadership, and the opposition have been so busy ranting and raving that we've gotten very little meaningful from them. They are in such a state of disorder, I don't know when they'll recover. But I don't think that we've seen much better from the people who are actually making the decisions. I'll give you an example. It was mentioned on this show just now about local content. It's all well and good to say, oh, we want Guyanese to have a fair share. And I agree with that and I support it. And I think the local content legislation needs to be looked at and needs to be strengthened. But who is a Guyanese? There's a man named Hong Bo Chu who was born in China and came to Guyana briefly. And he's the largest shareholder in Bai Shanlin. And the government gave him Guyanese citizenship. So he's now equally entitled to have small and medium-sized mining claims, although those are reserved for Guyanese. He's equally entitled to register under the same local content legislation as a Guyanese. So the government is silent on its policy of Guyanese citizenship and keeping Guyanese citizenship intact, pristine for us Guyanese. If we have given Guyanese citizenship to the man who owns Bai Shanlin and we are silent about that, what kind of government do we have? So this kind of logic, I agree, needs to be seen from both sides. But I am at a loss to think that we're talking about local content and talking about Guyanese and quarreling with the Trinidadians, and there has been no statement of any policy on closing that door to people applying for Guyanese citizenship, especially since we must understand that the newfound wealth that is going to be coming in as a windfall has to be spent improving the infrastructure, improving education, improving health, improving roads for Guyanese. We have an influx of Venezuelans, they are welcome. We have an influx of Brazilians, they are welcome. We have people coming from all over the world, they are welcome. But they must come here, they must register, they must get visas, they must pay taxes, and they must be contributing their work and contributing their taxes and contributing their efforts for the benefit of Guyanese. And we have to understand that system, and so far we haven't done it. So I agree with Lenox about the logic and about the dissembling going on in the opposition, but the government is not doing its job yet. And that can improve with real consultation. Both sides need to have a serious talk.
On consultation, which is tied to Article 13. I'm just wondering if the two lawyers or even the Deputy Speaker could expound on Article 13, because the Attorney General is reported in one of the media that it's not enforceable. So I'm just wondering, what is Article 13? If you know and if you can. I'm sure you all know anyway. Let's magistrate first.
Well, Article 13, as the group is now known to be, or one group advocating for Article 13. Article 13 is quite clear, and it's there for a specific purpose so that there can be open and full disclosure based on what we are eligible or entitled to know. But the lack of transparency is what is keeping us in the dark. And I want to raise another point, which I think, which again was been raised in the program, which ought to be made known and clear to us. We are spending all this money, which we earn, the pittance, the 2% which we earn from ExxonMobil, to build these FSO vessels to transport or store whatever the oil that we're getting when the day comes. But as I know it, oil prices fluctuate on the stock market. Today, now it can be $100. An hour from now, it can be $105. Another 2 hours from now, it can go down to $90. How are we selling the oil which we extract when the day comes? Where are we getting our 2% on? Are we going to hold the oil from $100, wait till it drops to 60, and then are we going to get our 2% out of that? Are we told who is buying our oil from the time that vessel set sail, or even before that, the price is negotiated, or maybe the quantity is negotiated? But how do we know? Is anyone telling us, the people? I don't still know how many lifts we've had since we start moving oil. I don't know how much are we being paid per lift as the oil leaves this country. I don't know where the oil is manufactured. I don't know what are we getting in return for the high percentage we're supposed to get from the manufactured product. All these things are done in secrecy. And the people of this country needs to know that. And when we're talking about keeping contracts and not negotiating the details, well, the people don't need to know all the details, but at least give them the mere fact, which is important to them. Give us the value so that we can be able to understand and say, well, from this step, we've earned so much, we're going to get so much. This is what our expenses are. When we're done with all of that, we've got 0.25% left of the 2%. That is what the diaspora, that is what the Guyanese people need to know when they come. We are hearing all the time that contracts have been negotiated. We hear only recently that one of the contracts was negotiated by the previous natural resource minister. When he was asked, how come you got a worse deal than ExxonMobil? He said, I was told to. If you are an elected member representing the people of this country, how can you have the audacity to say, I have been told to? If you have been told to and you did not agree with that, then the decent thing to do is that you should have said, listen, this job is not for me. You keep it. I am here to represent the people who have caused me to be here. And if I can't do that in the interest of the people, well, I don't belong here. We go back to what Lenox said earlier as well. The Liberal government is a minority government in Canada. But the NDP is a vibrant opposition. And they, for political reasons, I'm sure, they consult with each other. And it has happened before the last election when the NDP wanted to bring up no confidence motion against the government then. and they were able to resolve it. But they resolved it for the better good of a majority of the people. But throughout the Canadian Parliament, for instance, there may not be direct consultation, but there's even distribution of representatives on the various commissions and boards, which reflect the interests of the people. As has been pointed out earlier on this show as well, no such thing happens, or there is no such dispensation of representation for the benefit of all. I am not here on this program to want to criticize or to condemn anyone in government or in parliament, but we have objective thinking. We formed our various movements, parties, and we want to be a part of the whole process which is going to take this country forward. And though we represent a small number of persons who have voted for our parties, it shows still that they have an interest in what we have to say. And they expect that we are going to deliver their word to whoever needs to listen to it. They didn't vote for the two major parties because they are dissatisfied with them. So to say that those parties, one or the other, speak for the entire country as opposed to one seat majority and the rest, it's not a way fair way to put it. There has to be some means or some way of having people participate in the process of governance if we're going to move this country forward in a way which will be beneficial to all of us.
Mr. Jonas, Senior Counsel, anything on Article 13?
Our constitution is described as a modern constitution, and I often wonder what's meant by that. You see, the American Constitution, for example, drafted back in the 1700s, was a very short document, and it has been expanded by various amendments as they went along. But when we talk about a modern constitution, more and more I get the impression we mean something that is so long-winded and unreadable that nobody even tries to understand it, unless they're doing it for a living. Article 13 is one of those feel-good clauses that doesn't have any teeth. It essentially says that an inclusionary democracy is what we want, and that involves consultation in decision-making by Guyanese citizens. But again, it sounds nice. Oh yes, in our inclusionary democracy, you must consult. But if you don't, it doesn't say what will happen. So to give you a parallel, there's a law that says you mustn't steal, and the law that says if you're convicted of stealing, you go to jail. So here we have an article in the Constitution that says we must, in an inclusionary democracy, consult. But there's no corresponding article that says if you don't consult, you go to jail. So it becomes meaningless. It becomes a nice soundbite that you rely on to, show what your good intentions are. But then, when crunch time hits, you are perfectly entitled to say, based on legal advice, I am not obligated to consult with anybody because there is no penalty involved. This thing has no teeth. There are no consequences. And I got majority. And the real law with teeth says that with my majority, I pass the laws in Parliament. Therefore, my Natural Resources Fund and my Natural Resources Commission, I will appoint, and you will not have any members on that commission. So the money that Sohan is talking about getting spent, I will spend it in my discretion because I've passed the act that allows me to do it. And that's what we have.
So the AG,
we have a remedy for corruption.
So the AG is right, it's not enforceable.
There are no teeth to it. No one can take the government to court for not consulting based on Article 13.
Mr. Shuman, anything on Article 13? And then I just want to talk about something about joiner lists.
You're muted, Lenox.
Mr. Shuman, you're muted.
Yeah, my apologies. I don't see much to add. There are a lot of constitutional clauses, feel-good clauses per se, that look at Article 9, for example. Sovereignty belongs to the people and they exercise it. That's within the preamble, obviously, but correction, you've got clauses within the preamble which are not enforceable, a variety of them. Article 27 that talks about right to free education. But if that right is not met, then what are the consequences? There are a lot of feel-good clauses in the Constitution. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, when I spoke to the Attorney General the last time we spoke anyway, he said, look, we are committed to revising the Constitution. I look forward to that process, and I hope that every Guyanese looks forward and gets engaged in that process.
So let's talk about some solutions now. We outlined the dilemma, the issues, the problem. What are some solutions? You just mentioned constitutional reform. That's one way forward. And the government presumably is committed to constitutional reform. You want to address that? And is the joiner list doable as a solution? The joiner list of the small parties, the new parties, the minor parties.
I strongly believe that there is scope for a center party, for a centrist movement per se. I think we've seen a lot of people shift that direction. There's a change in demographics. Whether constitutional reform is the silver bullet, I don't know. I think it requires a tremendous amount of political maturity is one. It also requires, to a certain extent, population growth, because the population in itself is still fairly small. If you have to deal with it, once again, you end up in this what I'd say somewhat race-based voting per se, although there is a tendency to shift away from that, or to be moving away from that. And I say that because before he left, His Excellency Greg Quinn, who was the High Commissioner of the UK to Guyana, we had a discussion going into the elections anyway, and he said, well, we were talking about forming a center force and all these things. And he said, Lenox, are you sure that this is, like, in your mind, is this the time? Because when they're examining it, they're looking, 15, 20 years down the road, just as the demographics change, they're hinging it on that change in demographics to bring about the kind of political change in Guyana. And my retort to him was, there is never really a good time or a bad time, but at least we have to start somewhere. And that is where we started in the 2020 elections. So maybe that in itself will bring about the kind of change. But I also think the government is acutely aware of that changing demographics. And I strongly believe that it would be a hard-pressed argument to go back to the electorate in 2025, not having undertaken to have meaningful constitutional reform, to go back to the electorate and say, well, we are going to champion constitutional reform. Of course, we know that when you get to the parliamentary process, you still need 2/3 majority to pass that constitution. Now, whether or not the opposition is engaged or wants to buy onto that, that's a different story altogether. But when I talk about political maturity, I think at some point, if both political parties were to say, look, in the interest of national development, we will make some things, let's agree on this, there will be some things that will be non-electoral issues, constitutional reform being one of them. So both of us are going to sit down, we'll get it done in national interest, and we'll just wipe that straight off the slate so that no political party can campaign on constitutional reform because we're doing it together. I think if you're to start taking that approach and making some of these things non-electoral language per se, I think you may see some movement or maybe some goodwill somewhere along the way. Whether or not they will or they have the political maturity to do that, I'm not sure that they do. I'm not sure that we're in that space as yet. But I would say give it a few more years, and then we could have this conversation again.
Okay, I notice Mr. Jonas smirked, so let's move to him. But,
I'm satisfied that neither party, when in government, wants constitutional reform. So that's not the solution, I'm afraid, because it's an impossibility. For there to be constitutional reform, both parties have to agree. And the last time there was any discussion and movement to amending the Constitution was back in 2001, when the discussion was propelled by violence on the street. That's the only way to move toward constitutional reform in Guyana, because when you're in power, you like it too much. If I get to control the Natural Resources Fund, if I get to appoint all the people to all the positions, I'm not going to change the rules for you. And that's what we see when either side is in power. So to call for constitutional reform is to ask to abolish poverty and to give every man a castle. It's a pipe dream. It's a pie in the sky. It will never happen. We have to figure out what can be done with the resources available. And what can be done is the second thing that Lenox talked about, which is to take advantage of the fact that our independent middle class, our professionals, our educated folk, our people who have access to the internet, access to social media, who are interfacing with each other and realizing that we are all Guyanese first and then Indo and Afro second. As that demographic changes and more people reject the stranglehold that the two parties have, if we get an independent parliament, which I think we will get, then we can force changes to that same Natural Resources Fund Act. We can force changes to the same Local Content Act, to all the legislation that is used and abused by whichever government happens to be in power, so as to force the commissions to have opposition members on the seats, to force the various bodies to have opposition members on the seats. We are going to, I'll give you one example. The whole of Guyana knows that before 2015, I'll give you two examples because both sides are equally guilty and it's unfair to just focus on one. Before 2015, the whole of Guyana knows that the expression Pradouville came about because the government used its control of central housing to give to itself below market value prime pieces of real estate to build houses. That wouldn't have happened if the opposition had seats in central housing and could say no and could veto it and could publicize it. It wouldn't have happened. The whole country knows that in 2016, the then government hid the $18 million signing bonus that was not enough, that they negotiated badly, that looked big to them, and they hid it. That couldn't happen if the petroleum legislation mandated that two of the seats should be appointed by the opposition, because then the opposition would see the contracts, would see that money coming in, and would inform the public. So all we need with an independent parliament is to make slight modifications to the Housing Act, to put two opposition members in the Central Housing Board, a slight amendment in the Natural Resources Fund, to put two opposition members on that commission. And you will have the beginning of transparency and hopefully the beginning of real government, fair government, reduction in corruption. But those proposals will be made. They will be shot down as long as the government controls Parliament. But the day will come when the government no longer controls Parliament. And then we may see some changes.
Mr. Sohan?
Well, we know for a fact that all the political parties are trying to champion the reform of the Constitution since 1992. Everyone has been condemning the 1980 Constitution. But after 1992, when we got to know or to suck the sweetness out of it, it was no longer of interest to them to want to change it one way or the other. It is clearly written in our Constitution that education is free from tertiary to university. Yet, some years ago, fees were implemented at the university level. Although parties have campaigned on it since before 2015 and since the last election, nothing has been done till now to change that. And with the crisis that we have gone through, especially with COVID, students were still being burdened with having to pay their fees. Unless they do that, they could not have sat the exam. And even during that crisis, it did not dawn upon government that, listen, we have campaigned on this as well, and it's provided for in the Constitution, and we should let the writings of the Constitution prevail for the benefit of those who really and truly were affected. Some people were able to get past it. The university itself tried to defer it, but that has not been amended or that has not been changed. So again, it is only there for the sake of lip service. We are trying to make changes to our laws as we go by. We just the other day make changes to a law, which I think is very important, where we said that, okay, power attorneys require certain additional documents and signatories so as to prevent corruption. But we are making other changes and we are not, remember, legislations are not read by themselves or in isolation. They have to be read in conjunction and in conjunction with the Constitution. So that when you change a legislation, which is ordinarily practiced in court, and tomorrow somebody gets up and decides to change it on the basis of the Constitution, then changing the law without changing the Constitution has no merit or has no purpose. So if we are going to be able to do this and achieve results with which going to be beneficial to all concerned, we ought not to say we're going to just change the laws carte blanche. We ought to say, let's say, go back again, Article 13 of the Constitution, it must be read in conjunction with something which has merit, or as Timothy said, there has to be, if not this, then that. Otherwise, what is it doing here? Just strike it out of the Constitution. If you gotta say that for the purposes of appointing judges, police officers, and constitutional commissions people, and you say, I just have to consult, but there doesn't have to be agreement, or there does not require meaningful consultation, then it still, again, has no merit. It's only there for the sake of being there and to pacify people, or maybe the electorate, that if this doesn't happen, well, then the majority has its say. So if we're going to go to constitutional reform, there must be mass consultation. And the small parties, or the third parties, as we are called, should have an important role, because for some way or the other, we do have a little bit more knowledge about certain things that goes on in this country. And especially, as Timothy said, the Constitution, only a few of us knows what is in this Constitution. The whole country doesn't know that. And it is for the people then who have the know-how, civil society, the people in the legal fraternity, other persons who are exposed otherwise. These are people who you need to be able to engage if we are going to be able to bring about any meaningful change or any meaningful amendment to the Constitution.
With that, gentlemen, I have to advise you that we have just went beyond our time of 9 p.m. Mr. Shuman, you have any final word before we close out?
You muted, Lenox.
That long speech and it was all muted. I just wanted to say thank you to you, Vishnu, Tim, and
I want to thank
Chandra,
you all as
Sohan,
well.
and the team. It's been a pleasure. The time runs by so quickly. I look forward to another opportunity to engage. Thank you.
Okay, same here, and let me thank Timothy Jonas, Mr. Chandra Sohan, yourself, Mr. Lenox Shuman, for taking your time off from your very, very busy program schedule this evening to join us and to enlighten us with those very, very educational points made tonight about the Constitution, consultation, good governance, accountability, transparency, Article 13. Thank you again, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vishnu. Thank you.